Space, the final frontier. Well, okay, not really. All right, take two. Here in the Mitten State, welcome to Code 47, bringing you all things Star Trek, spanning the quadrants, the best thing since the neutral zone.
Holy cow! Back again, and in this time in full uniform. What you think
so
about
much extra uniform? I am in a full uniform right now.
We put Katie in the jacket from the guy from David Byrne of Talking Heads fame. Watching the days go. You know what? That's probably a reference way over your kids' head. I should probably stop doing that. All my pop culture references are easily older than Katie, so I should really not. But anyway, hey, we're back. This is episode 83 of the Code 47 podcast on the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network. Quick plug for the network. You can find all of our shows by subscribing to the Secret Friends Unite podcast feed on the podcast streamer of your choice. You get this great program where we talk about Star Trek. You also get Secret Friends Unite Prime. Todd Oxford and myself for the last 9 years talking about geek stuff, being your guide to the geek side, video games with co-op mode, and Star Wars with the Holocron Chronicles. All right, plug over. I am here with my esteemed colleagues. That would be Mr. Peter Stein, representing Operations Division.
Hey, everybody.
That is if you're watching on our YouTube channel, which you should be. Peter, I can't see your rank. What are you flying
it's there.
Today?
I'm flying Lieutenant JG.
Oh, he's going by his club ranks. Good deal. And then we have the Pipless crewman, medical/science division. That would be Katie Q. Katie, how are you?
I am good.
Good deal.
I am angry. Charlie, how dare you make me watch this movie?
I'm going to go full Palpatine and go, good. We will funnel your anger into some wonderful content creating. I, of course, am Fleet Captain Charles Carden, your Trek Lord of West Michigan, your kindly Trek servant. And we're going to talk about some Star Trek today. We not only have 2 great episodes of Lower Decks to reflect upon, but we're also going to, and the reason that Peter suggested we all get into uniform, Peter and I had our own Nemesis uniforms, and we cobbled together what you see Katie wearing, including the comically gigantic jacket she's wearing.
This is why I can never buy a cosplay outfit off the shelf.
I know. Well, it really works that you're sitting in a chair and don't have to move that much. So that part of it is absolutely perfect. But eventually, if we find something for you, we'll get it over to Mia, who's our kind of our club seamstress, and she can help out.
She's the one who did the amazing job on my Strange New World cosplay, altering that. So when we finally are able to release photos of that, you will see me as a brunette and rocking my Unachin Riley cosplay.
We're also really looking forward to, assuming that we're all at Grand Rapids Comic-Con next month, having the 3 of us together in a photo booth and doing some nice promo shots potentially for this podcast. So we will see more news on that. But anyway, don't want to get too deep into the rabbit hole of self-promoting. So let's jump right on in and talk about episode 5 of season 3 of Lower Decks. Peter, you're up first. And these descriptions really leave a lot to the imagination because they're like, blah, 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 this thing happened, boop. But anyway, it's yours.
They're pretty brief. So, Season 3, Episode 5, Reflections. Mariner and Boimler work the Starfleet recruitment booth at an alien job fair. Rutherford challenges himself.
Oh, what
That's
a great
very,
episode.
Very vague, but yes.
What a vague, great description of what I thought was a great episode that really balanced, to me, something you don't see a lot of in Lower Decks, which is doing some kind of world building within the show. That you're like, all right, well, when we met Rutherford, he was an ensign, he came on board, he's half. It's funny in this episode, as they have to work on his bits and they take off the top of his skull, he has Soong-type android parts. He's got Data's little blinky Christmas lights in the white dome. So I'm like, he's like a little proto-Data. I thought that was something I noticed when I was rewatching it again this morning. But it was really cool. Yeah, he's having malfunctions, and so he starts having memories and stuff. And that was great, and it was certainly a little bit more serious, but gave us a lot of cute little Easter eggs in that we got to see the cadet uniform that you saw featured in DS9. Although that little costuming error, his undershirt should have been the kind of kind of the gray under. I'm trying to remember correctly. Did they wear kind of the DS or the Voyager undershirts with that one, Peter? If I remember correctly,
I
when you
think
saw like
so.
the cadets, like in the episode. The hell was the Valiant in season 6 of DS9 when they had those Red Squad cadets? Wasn't it
You didn't
a
really see undershirts. They may have had like a little bit of a black clip underneath, but
yeah, I'm trying to remember. I might have
mostly
to.
it was just kind of a
Yeah,
TNG collar.
yeah,
So
right, exactly.
they didn't really switch over to this where it's a 2-piece. They just
Right, exactly.
jumpsuit.
But again, minor nitpick, and I love that we got to see a Romulan D-Daradex class Warbird. We got to see the Delta Flyer, which God, I love the Delta Flyer. Boy, I would love to see the Delta Flyer make a comeback. But more to the point, so that was, as I said, kind of the serious part of the episode. The typically, comic more run affair was working essentially a booth at a trade show, doing Starfleet
Yes.
recruiting. Oh my God! You know what? I've done all the talking. Katie, what did you think about that bit?
I thought it was absolutely hilarious, and like I liked the stuff with Rutherford. I thought that was good. I was like, cool, getting some Rutherford background. But I honestly could have had an entire episode of them just at this booth, especially Rich watching Boimler just absolutely freaking lose it. It was absolutely amazing, and it really is such a great thing because there is like that kind of like critics of Star Trek are like, oh, it's not an exploration show. It's, they're just like a bunch of warmongers. And he's sitting there like screaming at people, did you want to be taken over by the Borg? Did you want to be taken over by the Romulans? We don't want to do this. We just want to look at our science stuff.
It's true. That's really
Yes.
what's across the Starfleet is. They get shoved into all these situations. And Katie, I know you're not crazy about Enterprise, but it's the show kind of starts at, Peter, you can attest to this. We just finished talking about season 2 of Enterprise not that long ago. They go out there in that first episode, they're like, DDD, space exploration, and immediately run into hostile aliens, more hostile aliens, pissing people off. So everybody wants to kill them. That's just the way stuff is. It's not like they can say, well, we're just going to go back to Earth and I guess we shouldn't be out here.
Well,
No,
how many times has Kirk, Picard, Janeway, Cisco, like they drop out of warp, someone shows up and like, we are from the United Federation of Planets on a peaceful mission of exploration, and then someone starts shooting. Like,
exactly.
Like,
Yep.
yeah, it's kind of how it works. But I also thought it was funny how it's like, hey, let's have a Constellation class on here, even though like that's probably not in service anymore.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Yeah,
on the table.
Yeah,
So,
the original Stargazer. And then they had a table of pads. So that is a great design, just the one that, because like Starfleet International, SFI, who is the greater organization of which the Grant Petoskey, our chapter, is a part of, they have their own logo and material, and that's all fine and good. But when we do our shows, like we're going to be doing, as I said, Grand Rapids Comic Con next month in November, the How to Halloween in Lansing a little bit later on here in October, we do more stuff promoting our chapter, but we don't have a pop-up tent thing happening, even though that would be super cool because we do stuff inside. There is a show in the state over in Monroe, Michigan called the Monroe Pop Fest. It's usually in September. We passed on it this year because April and I didn't own a pop-up canopy. We just actually bought one for this toy show that we worked here in Grand Rapids locally yesterday. So how fun would it be if I could, through Vistaprint or something, get that, Starfleet and then get just a straight up Starfleet tablecloth and just have
Paramount
that
is on their franchising game,
yeah.
on their marketing game. They'll start making.
Holy cow, we're having a rough day. We got dumped twice with this audio. So we're going to jump forward to episode 6 and hope it doesn't happen again. So fingers crossed.
Although there might be a weird moment in the audio where it did upload me, I'm just by myself going, so hey guys, everybody was kicked, and now I'm alone on the bridge.
Oh my gosh, yes, mine didn't. Yeah, you're right. We'll see if that turns out. Okay, so episode 6 is yours, Katie. Let's get everybody fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
All right. Episode 6 is All Here, Trust Nothing. The Cerritos crew unexpectedly spends a day on Deep Space Nine. And as I was saying previously, I just absolutely loved all of the cameos in here. And like I said, it's very much a love of Star Trek. And you can tell that these folks absolutely love Star Trek with just their treatment of Deep Space Nine and how they're making fun of all of the fun things that fans like to make fun of. And it just is all around a good time.
Yeah. It's
hanging on the promenade
right.
and dangling your
Yeah,
legs.
I
over
love
the
that.
edge.
And it was
Right, I need to stop and talk to a suspicious
the
reporter.
the junior Birdman. I liked, as I was saying before, in what is now our lost track, because we're now on the third recording of this episode in segments. Recording 2 is like 30 seconds, so we'll go from recording 1 to recording 3. It's going to be a little jarring, but just stick with us. But I was saying I loved Shax with Kira. And the fact that they were you said, well, they were kind of reverse. Katie said before, they were kind of reverse one-upping each other. They were one-downing each other, which is what I've chosen to call this episode, which I love. But it was the old, trope in any show, like, okay, we're from this huge universe, but somehow we know each other. But they did well with that. They were both in the Resistance, and they kind of cobbled that together. And I think that was pretty sweet. But it was fun, and it felt like kind of gave me shades of, Quark scamming, or like, do you remember that episode? What was it? Katie, we talked about in DS9 in season 2. It was the one with the guy, he was also an El-Orian. It was Chris Sarandon, the actor.
Oh yeah, with the good luck.
Yeah. It looked, that's what,
Oh,
that's what the device looked like that they chucked at Quark's replicator to make it shut down.
Yes, that is originally when the guy opened the jacket, I was like, oh no, it's not one of those.
What were they, kind of luck machines or whatever it is?
Yeah, although it was very much, again, I feel like they did that kind of on purpose, because it was kind of playing to that absurdity of all of the stuff that happened at Quarks and DS9 and all of the weird illusionaries.
And then the B story of this, which flowed really nicely into the A story, was the as we found out, a fake Orion bro who is like, who they bump into the bar at Quarks. Plus, I love it. We haven't even talked about how the fact that Quarks is now like it's like TG
franchise with gift shops.
It's like TGI McFriday or TGI McScratchies, to use a Simpsons reference. But yeah, it's like it's Applebee's basically. It's the Star Trek Applebee's, now changing the name of the episode to Star Trek's Applebee's. And I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. And it's perfect.
I would actually say it's more of a Cracker Barrel, because the Cracker Barrel is the one with the gift shop and like all of the tchotchkes in the front.
Star Trek Cracker Barrel it is, and of course I spelled it wrong, but thank God for spell correct. But yeah, that was. But yeah, the fake Orion guy who was like, yeah, blah blah blah, pirates and stuff. And Tendy's like,
raised in Ohio.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I'm from Cincinnati. At the end of it, they finally break him down and figure out he's a big phony. But then Tendy goes into, and we got a big taste of that last season. The fact that she's basically Orion pirate royalty, and when she decides to break it out, like, get the fuck out of the way. She's terrifying. Taking the guy's gold tooth, and that's how she gets through the security door. And oh my goodness, a lot of crazy shit going on in this episode. It was just, I absolutely loved it, hands down.
Thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorites so far.
Yeah, and I was also just really, really happy to hear Quark again.
Oh,
and they got all of the Quark tropes.
Yeah,
all of them.
It was amazing that they were able to fit all of them into the episode without it feeling like constrained or forced.
Or forced. Like, it didn't feel forced, but they managed, like, they got his screeching in, they got him like being annoying to people at the bar, him bargaining with people who have something over his head, him filching something, standing in the brig and mocking someone in the brig, getting screwed in a deal, and then in the end quoting a rule of acquisition. Like, they got everything that Quark does.
It was
amazing.
It was your Quark's checklist. It was hands down.
Yes.
So
I think that should be the name of the episode, is Quark's checklist.
Oh, you bet. Changing it right now. I also keep going back to Zencaster to make sure that it's not going to kick us out again. But oh my God, this is the most episode Quark's checklist. This is the most episode name changing I've done since we've been doing the show together. We just keep coming up with good ones. So anyway, to vamp a little extra time, because we lost a chunk in segment 2. So now we're more than halfway through the season. We know we have the Veritas 2 episode coming up, the holodeck episode in, I think, segment 8. So we've got now 7, 8, 9, 10. We got 4 episodes left. So where do you think things are going to end up? My big prediction is that at the end of the season, we're going to get the super then quickly resolved in the beginning of season 4, Mariner leaves Starfleet, become an archaeologist and hang out with what's her ass. That's my big end of the season prediction. I don't necessarily know that we'll see other parts of that, like, oh, they'll keep checking in or they're going to keep talking. But yeah, my vibe is in episode 10. things are going to go in that direction. So what do you guys think?
I could see that happening. I would like to see it if it's not immediately resolved in the season 4. If it does happen, where we get a little bit of like back and forth, kind of like we did with Boimler and the Titan
Right.
at the beginning of season 2, where it's that little bit of back and forth. Because I think that if she is going to be doing that, it's going to be more of a character struggle for her to come back to Starfleet.
Right.
Just so that she, like, because she's very much kind of pro and anti Starfleet in a lot of different ways. So I think her getting a new taste for something else and maybe doing the exploration and all of that fun stuff that she likes to do.
Right.
But I think it might also be something where you see that kind of maybe come to head in the finale and her deciding not to do that.
Right.
Rather than her having to leave and then come back. Because it does feel like the growth for her has been her realizing that Starfleet isn't as goody two-shoe by the book, critical as she thought it was.
I like that. You're right. It would take the more predictable path, because what I described seems like it's like, they're really, they're teeing it up. They're tossing a softball, and maybe they'll go in a different direction. I like that. Peter, what do you think? What do you think we've got to see between now and the end of the season?
Well, I like both of those ideas. So.
Right. You're right. Either one could be great.
I think that we're going to see another like big-ish cameo near the end. I don't know who it's going to be, obviously, but I think that they're going to bring one more person, kind of like how like they sneaked Riker into the end of 1,
right?
And I don't think they.
It was Riker and Troy.
Riker and Troy were at the end of 1, and they were in the beginning of 2. They didn't really sneak a big cameo in the end of season 2, but no, they did. It was Gomez.
Oh yeah.
Which was a deep cut, but she was there.
Not much.
So
yeah, still.
But I suspect we'll see another Trek name. It'd be kind of fun. I do wonder, because they've been dropping it a bunch, if we're gonna get some sort of mirror universe, something or other.
Right.
Which could be entertaining.
Right. That'd be really great.
Just once. I know some people are like, "Oh, the mirror universe is overused."
Okay, but in all fairness, what, again, would make it so great is because it's another one of those tropes that lower did.
Right, it's a trope that you could like bring in and turn on its head and make it ridiculous. It could be entertaining.
It does.
So I honestly don't really know what they're going for at this point, but I think that they're going to have some goofy stuff in store for us.
Right.
Maybe we'll see that bit with Mariner.
It's what they do.
No,
it's what they do. All right. Well, we're leaving the fun part of the program and we're getting into the unfun part of the program. It's like she's doing the cracking her knuckles, turning on the caps lock. I think Katie's just going to go nuts. But let me try to master the chaos by at least.
I tried to like look for some good things so that I could say something positive a few times.
It might happen. Let me at least I'm going to try to blast through portions of this synopsis to just kind of set the stage.
Even the synopsis is long.
I will.
Well, the synopsis has a whole bunch of stuff about like
I want to start. Yeah, I do want to start with just throwing out a trigger warning for anyone, because we are going to be talking about sexual assault.
Fair, very fair. Thank you.
I just want to put that out there.
It is a theme in the film.
Yeah,
yes,
big time.
For some fucking reason. Okay, but I'm going to leave that, and then we can continue.
Wind up. All right, we are going to be talking about 2002's Star Trek Nemesis. Again, this was the fourth and final film to star the cast of Star Trek: The Next Generation. A bunch of characters we absolutely love. It was written by John Logan, who was a well-known industry name at that time for being a producer and writer and director in the scene for probably 2 decades prior. Brent Spiner actually had part writing in it, and then Rick Berman. And I think this was pretty close to another nail in the coffin for Rick Berman. I mean, he gave us this, and then he gave us These Are the Voyages, which is the finale of Enterprise, and it was just like, fuck you, dude, we're done with you forever. But at any rate...
At least he apologized for that one.
You're right. The apologies for this film, it's been 20 years, we still haven't seen him. I believe this was a holiday film, so we are actually nearing the 20th.
Yes, it was. I remember seeing the trailers at Thanksgiving and being like, "Oh, they're going to destroy the Enterprise. Oh no!
Oh no! So original. Thank you." But at any rate, film is set in the 24th century after the end of Star Trek Voyager, which of course does end up giving us a cameo from Kate Mulgrew as a now Admiral Janeway. But anyway, the plot of the film. As the Enterprise ends up having to go to Romulus to meet a new ruler who ends up being human, who also ends up being a clone of Captain Picard, who's taking control of the Enterprise, the Romulans starting through a coup d'etat.
And thus began the obsession with the Romulans that still has not ended.
Exactly. So yeah, the film did come.
Don't get me wrong, I love Romulans,
Right.
but holy crap, guys.
Yeah.
Let them be.
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of like, to me, it's kind of like the Borg. I'm done with the Borg for a good long while. Not only after Voyager, but certainly after Picard season 2. But I digress. I want to keep one hand on the wheel here. The film did come out on December 13th of 2002. Generally mixed reviews and publications criticizing it for being the least successful of the franchise. I think
For good reason.
I think that's true. It made $67 million worldwide against a $60 million budget, which is ouch for a huge franchise, for sure. This caused plans for another film to be dumped, and then the series was rebooted into the JJ verse. And Star Trek Picard is considered to be a continuation, and we will see a true finale of those characters in season 3 of that show. So,
well, we'll see the next attempt. We'll see if it lands.
We absolutely will. My format is, and I think the first round of this is going to be very brief: highs, lows, and legacy. The highs are easy to answer. The legacy is easy to answer. The lows is going to be kind of the middle part. So let's, at the very least,
I do have a good high for this.
We'll start with Peter giving us a high. So go ahead, please.
The thing I do have to say that this film opened strongly.
I say Brett Spinner singing Blue Skies. I was like, how can
No, not that. No, not that.
Right.
That's a decent scene.
Right.
No, how it opens with like
that nice
the mitosis,
zoom in,
you get kind of the idea of cloning,
right.
And then all of a sudden you have that big old pan down past Remus to the capital of Romulus, and that whole bit where you're like, oh shit, the Romulan Senate is destroyed. What the hell is going to happen? One of the best cold opens outside of Praxis and
Star Trek 6.
The Borg dream sequence in First Contact.
Right.
Like
very strong. Out the gate,
this is a fantastic opening sequence.
Yeah.
And then it begins to go downhill.
Right. And like you said, transitions into the wedding. We get
the wedding's good.
Yeah,
too.
we get. I would say you get
something that we've been waiting for.
For instance,
really like for 15 years.
I mean, you get some nice interplay and humor. You get a cameo from Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan, where 23 is my limit talking about marriages, which is hilarious. Further adds to the humor of that character. Worf from Romulan ale should be illegal. No explanation of why later in the film Worf is part of the crew of the Enterprise again, because when we last saw him, DS9 was ending, he left Starfleet to be the Federation ambassador to Kronos.
Insurrection had the same issue.
That didn't work out. He got fired from that job, so he's like, well, Starfleet will take me back with no promotion, and I'm still wearing a red uniform for some reason, even though I'm the security guy again. No big explanation for that. But I would say I'm with Peter. If I was to transition to talk about highs, that opening sequence, so much promise. It's the horse right out the gate that immediately trips over something and breaks all 4 of his legs. Sorry to pick on horses. Sorry to make the glue factory analogy, but that is really where things go very quickly. But I love the singing, and once we leave Earth and we're on the ship, I think we're in bad shape. So, Katie, do you have anything?
I mean, honestly, I think
to add?
If I could just say
one more. Dial it back.
I think that honestly, the film really starts to trip up after you meet Shinzon. Like before that, I mean, the B plot with B4 is still kind of a dumpster, but like the lead up to that is still kind of okay. We're like, okay, we're leading up. There might be something interesting, but then once you get to Shinzon, that's when it drops.
Right. He's a clone, really and he's dying, and he needs your DNA, but he's also crazy.
They take the scope of undiscovered country levels of galactic import and then shrink it down to a personal vendetta.
Exactly.
And that's really where at least the A plot flops for me.
True. Yeah. All right, Katie, something good, and if you don't have it, you don't have it, but go for it.
No. And I would totally agree. Like, I got through the wedding scene, and I was honestly confused as to why. I was like, if this movie just keeps with this kind of Star Trek TNG feel, like, I don't see what the problem is. This seems like it's just kind of good fun antics,
good, clean Romulans, fun. Now, had you not seen the film before, or
I'd
you just
never
didn't
seen the
remember?
film.
Oh,
Never seen
okay.
the film.
That I didn't know.
So I was expecting, because everybody's like, oh my gosh, Nemesis, it's horrible, canned. So I was expecting an absolute dumpster fire, and so watching it, I honestly it was definitely I was surprised to see Tom Hardy, and I was like, good for
Yeah,
you, buddy.
that put his career in the dumpster for a while.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sad. I didn't think he did a bad job, honestly. I thought it was pretty good, and I thought that the A and B plot, while they definitely faltered in a lot of places, there was that duality that TNG was kind of known for, of showing you have Data and B4 as dual characters that completely identical except for in memory. So Data implants his memories to try to make them. And then there's that whole conversation between Data and Geordi of, well, what makes him an individual? And are you making him yourself by giving him your memories? Mm-hmm. Then you have the opposite going on with, Picard and Shinzon of, we have the exact same DNA. It's just our experiences that have made us different. So how different are we? What makes you who you are? So I was like,
yeah, and that was an interesting story that they picked up.
Incredibly interesting. So I thought, I was, halfway through the movie, I'm like, I don't actually think this is that bad. I think that Tom Hardy's doing a really good job. He's holding his weight with Picard and with, Patrick Stewart, which is a thing to say, being able to do that on screen. And then we got to my low.
Okay, and Katie, we'll flip the script and we'll do it in reverse. We'll go you, Peter, me. Because I feel like, without a doubt, you have more to say about this than any of us. So please.
I have a lot to say about this.
Okay,
so,
this could end up being one of our longest episodes, even though we lost 8 minutes of it. But
yeah, exactly.
So please go for it. I'm even going to mute myself.
I was honestly immediately pissed by the portrayal of Hardy or of Shinzon, just because they immediately did the kind of semi-homophobic, he is androgynous, he's wearing very skin tight, very kind of presenting himself as kind of gay vibes, but immediately starts kind of objectifying and getting real too close to Troy, where then Riker is immediately, oh, she's mine, going over to kind of protect his property type of deal. Luckily, Picard does step in and is like, hey, that's not what we're here for. So I was like, okay, that's weird. Then all of a sudden, the Remans have some sort of psychic link, and they are interjecting a random sex scene between Riker and Troy. And I was like, okay, random sex scene. Cool. They're married. Give the people what they want, I guess, because we have been waiting 15 years for them to have a relationship. Don't need this, but okay. Only to have Shinzon show up halfway through intercourse so that he can sexually assault Troy as she is crying and saying no and trying to put herself out of her own head, completely disassociating, classic sexual assault victim mentality, understandably so. And she finally pushes him off. Riker's just looking confused, what's wrong? And I'm like, obviously she's very upset. Why are you, something obviously happened and you're just sitting there confused. Picard completely just...
That's the worst. That's what Peter and I were, yeah.
I went ballistic when he was like, no, you're not able to. And even her reasoning, which was, I am a liability, not, I was just sexually assaulted and I needed time, because you can tell she is an emotional and mental disaster. Horrible. Which, again, understandably so. And he literally tells her that she needs to subject herself to more assault because he needs her there. I was like, first off, that is not something Picard would do.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of that in this film.
Antithesis to his behavior. I was so pissed. And the fact that her, I guess, getting back at the advisor of
the viceroy. It was Ron Perlman, actually. It was Hellboy.
Yeah. So her way of getting back was to relive her trauma and have to reconnect with him. And so she could find out where the ship was, only to have Riker actually be able to get the catharsis of killing him, which, because, obviously, because that guy had assaulted his wife, he's the one who gets to take the victory lap on that. It was, everything about it was just, this is very clearly coming from a male perspective as far as what men think that sexual assault is like and what they think is vindictive and how catharsis would happen. It was just an absolute utter disaster and totally ruined the movie for me, where I was going to come in as an advocate for this movie up until that point, and I was just absolutely floored by it. And then reading Troy's like comments as far as like the fight that she had to have for her pay and for her like availability and just all of her rights on this set also pissed me off. And the fact that they were like, well, we'll just replace you with 7 of 9 if you don't like it.
I didn't even really know that much about it. I know that there was a Jerry Ryan cameo that was thrown around, but I also know, it ended up being Kate Mulgrew. I also know those two actresses really didn't get along during the production of Voyager. I hadn't, you've done a little bit more reading into the controversy. I have my thoughts on some of the controversies, which I'll save for my portion, but that I'll tell you, I did not know about.
Yeah, and also the fact that they had Shinzan, like he was the emotional one as the villain, where he literally says the only thing he has are his personal experiences and emotion to go off of, where Picard's like, well, I have experience and logic on my side. And I'm like, it was just kind of that whole like feminizing the villain to show him as evil. And it just, that part really, all right, I will get off my soapbox.
No, that's okay. That's exactly why we're here to talk about it. And your perspective is incredibly unique. You're the woman on this show. You have a female.
I am femme presenting. Yes.
No, and it's something that Peter and I not only don't have, but we also have. I have 20 years from watching this. Peter, you saw it when it came out as well. So we've had 20 years to fucking stew about how much we hate this movie. You have basically 20 minutes.
Yes.
But the way that you're coming out and representing this is invaluable, because us, Peter, and again, I don't necessarily want to speak for you, and you're going next, but we basically have our Trek-based nitpicks that potentially overall story. This is shitty, but even like, you said it best. Picard wouldn't do this. That's not his character. That's what I'm going to speak to after Peter goes, because I have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, and there were definitely those moments, like their entire interaction with the First Planet, where they just started like running and gunning and showing. I'm like, this is not First Contact or Prime Directive at all. Right. But I guess like that way I was kind of able. I'm like, okay, movie. They want it to be action packed. Okay, whatever. Fine.
Yeah.
And also,
it was. Yeah.
Peter, I'm going to interrupt you and add one more thing.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. There is a 50% success rate with any of Sung's androids at this point, because the last android they operated besides Data was Lore. So
look what he did.
Why
leaving the board?
You have one that is cool and wants to be better for humanity. The other one is a psychopath who wants to destroy everything.
Well, they also have Sung's wife. Just to throw that out.
That's true. But
as far as
nobody
Data,
ever talks about that. Yeah.
Right. I'm just saying, just to be fair for Sung, like there is one more.
But why would you just activate him and then just kind of like leave him be?
That's cool. Go on. But no, would you go? He's a simpleton, for lack of a better expression. So he's just like dee. He's kind of. I
was so confused. I'm like, this is lore. This is going to be some sort of lore trick or something going on here.
Yeah, because how else could
when I saw it, I was hoping, but
I was looking at. I was like, there's going to be something wrong, but they do not have a good success rate with activating those droids. So I wish.
Yeah. So why would you leave it? Why would you leave the chance? And they totally do.
Or even like when he's got the secondary like hatch on the neck, and Data's like, "What's this?" And Troy's like, "I don't know." I'm like, "Why did you activate him? He's got these ports, then you don't know what they are."
And Geordi's like, "Oh, it's a redundant memory port. Must be because his memory crashes." Like,
okay.
So you're just
hey, Geordi. I think you'd be able to tell if this was installed later.
Yeah, right.
You're the chief
engineer, right?
Yeah, and he's just like, I don't know. It's
that was one thing that. Like,
yeah.
Anyway,
all right, Peter, wind it up. You go for it.
Yeah. So just on that, because it made me think about this thing. My brother and I were talking about this movie last night because I was saying how we were going to talk about today. And one of the things that bothers me about this film, which actually kind of began with Generations, honestly, was how most of the crew kind of gets the back seat.
Right.
So like Troy gets shoved into the front for like the most horrific reason, and I agree with Katie. I hate that scene.
Jesus.
Like obviously not for the same reasons, because I can't quite wrap my head around all of that, but it's a terrible scene.
Yeah.
But I'll leave that there. But like you see Dr. Crusher for all of like a minute and a half
Right.
for most of the film.
Mhm.
She shows up at the end, but like she's at the wedding, and then she shows up in sickbay once,
Right.
and that's it.
Well, she comes and chats with Picard when Picard's looking at.
Yeah, when he's
photo
but
of
she's
Tom
like
Hardy.
barely there.
Well,
She's
and then
like-
Dr. Crusher doesn't do anything.
and then her role is to talk about. Did we just lose everything again?
No.
Nope.
Okay,
You're
or just
still good.
okay. I just wanted to make sure because my
No.
screen flashed.
Jinx it.
And-
Jesus, you freaked me out.
No, I don't have any of the lines showing our sound, so that's
That sometimes goes out for me
Okay.
too.
Yeah.
It should be.
No,
sorry,
I'm
folks.
seeing-
Interrupted
Yeah, sorry,
everybody.
folks. Yeah, exactly. But yes, Peter, go back to it, please.
I have PTSD from system
Yeah,
failures.
right.
But yeah, like Crusher doesn't do a whole lot. Geordi kind of gets dumbed down a little bit. Like there's when he's talking about Thaleron, he's still pretty,
Right.
intelligent about stuff, but he kind of like takes a back seat on a lot of it. And kind of through the TNG movies, less so with like First Contact and Insurrection, but like they kind of turned it into like just the Picard and Data show,
Right, big.
which is then what you see when the series Picard picks up, and that's all they focus on. It was like,
Right.
dude, there's a lot more to Picard himself and to the Next Generation in general than just those two. Like, let's not pretend that they're not great characters. They're amazing characters,
Right.
but there's a lot more to TNG than that. So that's like one thing that would really bothered me about this film,
Mhm.
because like, Riker doesn't really do anything.
Right. Besides, be kind
Like,
of
he-
a misogynist about,
Right.
a little
Just
bit.
my
Yeah.
wife.
Like, when
I'm
I
which
was
again isn't his
like-
character. It's not
Right.
his
like
character.
from
at
my
all.
perspective, like the one thing where he steps behind her when Shinzon's there is it was more of a protective thing, but that's coming from my background. That's how I understood that gesture, was more of a watch out, man. If she's not gonna get in your face, I will. That's more how I read that, but that's my
It was kind of
Um,
like the bar fight scenario. Like, hey, bro.
yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, like Riker just kind of got slapped around a lot. He didn't really do anything other than having that misogynistic trend, which was just weird.
Right. Which again
Like, because
isn't
Riker is like, he's
not
a
him.
womanizer, but he's not like
He's not a jackass. He doesn't
Right.
treat,
a jackass.
doesn't treat women disrespectfully.
Right, and that's
Yeah.
the thing is that he wouldn't really. I don't see him even doing that, like, because that kind of like coming like the bar of like being chivalrous and like, oh, I'm going to come to her. Like,
Well, part of that for me was just like they just were married, and so they were feeling really, really connected at that point. So he was just like,
right,
Okay.
But even then,
that's
like,
kind of because he didn't like get fully behind her. He
right.
like took.
But
force
Troy
down.
can also like totally handle herself, and they weren't allowed
Oh, she can.
any of that. And that was the part of
Yeah.
like, again, that's not Riker's style.
No,
So
it's
yeah,
not.
total
It was just-
agreement on that part.
it was like, it was just weird. So yeah, I didn't like how the crew was handled. And then I don't know. There's just a lot of stuff about this.
I
It's
mean,
kind of low.
all right.
Um,
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, my brain is still percolating. I was just watching it just a little bit ago to try to like look at certain things, and there's just a lot of it comes for me down to how clumsily the analogies were handled.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it had the bones of at least a mediocre TNG episode.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Right, and-
absolutely.
Like it kind of had like a nature versus nurture sort of
Right.
deal. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of what they're getting at. And then all of a sudden it's just like we keep flip-flopping how we're talking. We basically keep equivocating our terms, and it was I'm a philosopher, so that was freaking driving
Oh
me
yes,
nuts.
absolutely.
It's like, no, you have to, how are you talking? You have to pick how you're talking about, like, come on. Like, I don't know.
Am I a mirror? Am I a shadow? Am I an echo? Come on.
Right.
Yeah,
What
what
are we
is it?
doing?
And Data had like a few good lines of like, the bit that he did in Stellar Cartography with Picard, where he's,
that was one of their.
I am myself.
Mhm.
If B4 had all of my memories, like, he would still not be me.
Right.
And like, well, yeah, obviously you're not the same person.
Right.
But like outside of like a few gems there, like there's a few like Picard lines or Data lines that are like really, really good. And Shinzon has a couple good ones in there too.
Yeah.
But like overall, they don't really resolve the conundrum that they create in a way.
Yes.
Right.
They just kind of like, it's a thing, and then in the end they're like, oh well, B4 might be Data again because he has all the memories. Like, that's not the answer that you should have gone with.
Right.
First of all, because that goes against what Data was talking about.
Right.
But then you're just like, well, then Shinzon could have been Jean-Luc had his experience, had his memories be different. Like, what are you trying to say?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's part of the frustration for me with this film is it gets that philosophical that step. It understands that Star Trek likes to do philosophy,
Mhm.
and then it's just like, hey, look, we found this cool thing.
Mhm.
Splat.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Splat. Yeah, exactly.
To that point too, I almost wonder if it would have been better to have Pulaski on set versus Crusher, because Pulaski was the one who had to deal with Picard's heart failure and
Right.
why
Right,
he had and I felt like that was something that wasn't it's such a that was such a critical episode for him in TNG, and there was literally no discussion about it, and there
was a lot of ignore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was
There's
just
a lot
like,
of
oh, well,
ignoring of
I've
Picard's
changed.
history.
And I'm like, no, let's have some let's hear him lecturing Shinzon as he has lectured so many other people about the, ignorance of youth and the, bravado that comes with ignorance. And
Give
all
him
that
a
stuff.
give him a Wesley smackdown,
Right.
which he does.
Right,
And
yeah.
he does those really speech in the first duty is amazing.
Right.
Just make him do something like that.
Right. And there were more than one. He did a great one. And there was an episode in season 6 where the ambassador who dumped all his negative emotions into a vessel, and he picked Troy. And then he gets in and he lectures.
Another
Yeah.
bad episode.
But it did give us a good Picard, well, you think it's okay because your job is so important that you can just essentially dump all your negative emotions on people because it's convenient. Let you do your thing. He's got that great speech thing down. So anyway, let me jump in. I'll give my thoughts and let's bring it back and we'll have a little bit more. So my biggest complaint outside of everything else that's been said, and this has been absolutely great. I apologize to our listeners for the fact that there's a chunk of the show missing. I hope that this whole thing doesn't fall apart because I think we're really doing some great work. But that drives me the most nuts about this film, and I was on another podcast talking about this 2 or 3 years ago. My biggest point was and I couldn't tell you without looking into it very specifically, when Paramount got around to saying, well, we're gonna make a swan song for the next generation, but we want to go in a different direction. We don't want something quite so samey. We need to find something totally different. So let's hand it off to someone who's not associated with the franchise, John Logan. Let's let one of the actors get involved in the writing, which I don't believe from a writing standpoint they did. Now, Jonathan
Patrick Stewart was pretty heavily involved in Insurrection, so it's not something that they have
in the writing part. Okay, that I wasn't so much aware of.
The story was
I have a giant book by Michael Piller about how it was
made. The story was developed by, or was helped with Spiner, but from my understanding, it was mostly written by John Logan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Berman, of course, is he is the overlord and gave all his blessings. So the most famous bit and kind of where things go wrong for me is that he handed to somebody who is not at all steepled in the lore. They don't understand the characters, because if you read his Bible, it's like he refers in some of his notes as Geordi being an alien. Or there's the fact that Worf's voice seems like it was lowered by an octave, like he was trying to change up some fundamental things. It would be like if this film was made like they did the aliens, or like they did the Klingons in the first season of Discovery. Well, let's totally change the Klingons, and you come back and Worf is massively different looking, and it's not to the point where between TOS and Star Trek the Motion Picture where Klingons got bumpy four-headed ridges, and then in DS9 you ended up seeing the 3 original Klingons, Kor, Koloth, and Kang, and they all had bumpy heads. That actually, they found a way to explain that away, which was really cool. They did that through Enterprise and saying the whole thing was a virus. And
although the tongue-in-cheek and Trials and Tribulations,
very tongue-in-cheek. They did proceed the Enterprise explanation. My overall beef, if I was to pick a low, is that it couldn't have come in a worse combination, because there was no period for recovery from how this ended up being. Let's hand it to an outsider who doesn't know how to write for Star Trek, doesn't understand the characters. And then it was, my feeling for this film was strengthened by what we saw, or it was deja vu'd by what we saw in season 2 of Picard. It was just, let's just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
No, because it was, here's another Sung type android, and we're going to rebuild him. And it was like the beginning of Data lore, except for instead of lore being a psychopathic genius, before was a simpleton, but he was really a tool that for some reason Shinzon, who you don't even really explain how he had the money and capital to rise to power because he was a war general, but then he was able to build this advanced starship.
Yeah,
More
they had like a cool commentary they could have done about a state coup d'etat dealing with like what appeared to be, at surface level described by Shinzon, legitimate civil rights complaints.
Right. And that was another
But then
thing.
it just kind of went,
like,
and no.
Like,
well,
way more interesting.
And as Shinzon is being like, I had to rise up to protect my people, in it, Picard
the conversation between him and Picard in the Romulan Senate is decent.
Absolutely.
I liked that.
No, Picard says, but how many Romulans had to die? And I'm like, are you literally asking a slave how many of his captors had to die for his freedom? Are you literally siding with the oppressors right now?
Right.
But it was, and I'm like, it was.
Again, so you got our characters being written in ways that defy our characters.
Right.
Like Troy, absolute lack of Beverly, Picard, and then even really only Data is.
I mean, Picard's response in the sense that, like, him abhorring violence, generally speaking, it kind of makes sense.
Right.
But I do see your point.
But at that point, why not?
Yeah.
How many of your people had to die? Like, how many?
Well, it could have been phrased at how many had to die.
Right.
For
Instead
that.
of it specifically
if you hadn't said just Romulans,
Yeah.
if you just said how many had to die for your goals,
and that's that nuance
it
of
would have
writing.
landed better, but it would have gone across the same point.
Right, exactly. That's the nuance of writing, where it just seemed like he just did not understand what he was trying to do, or was like, no, this guy is bad regardless. Like, we gave him a sad backstory, but he is evil. I'm like, no, if you give him like a nuanced backstory, that means there was some justification at some points, and that's going to taint.
And the way they describe the Remans, like they had every justification to do what they did.
Absolutely.
Which is another nitpick for me, actually, was when this originally came out. I mean, I've always been a canon stickler. I've ever since.
And me too. It's my scene.
Like, I had a copy of the encyclopedia that like I slept with under my pillow. Like, I'm that.
God, me too.
And that's what I appreciate about you.
But anyway, when they first introduced the Remans, like, we always knew that there was Romulus and Remus. It was like, oh, cool reference. But then they're like, oh yeah, and then there's the Remans, and I'm sitting there going like,
huh?
What? Why haven't we heard of them before? And like, I guess. And then, and also, like, they're still an offshoot of the Vulcans. You can tell they have like Romulan, like slight ridge, the forehead,
and the psychic powers,
ears, and the telepathic abilities, which they've honed.
Right.
Like, you can tell that they whoever was helping do the world building kind of understood that.
But then they kind of didn't.
It's like, oh, and then there's the Romulans who are gonna like enslave their own
subcast
people, kind of, even though they both know where they came from. Like, there isn't really in the universe, because of how little time technically has passed and how much technology they had and all that. Like, they didn't have like the ignorance and shit like humans can use as an excuse for what happened in the past. Like, it doesn't make sense for them to suddenly enslave their own people before, like, because this would have happened before the mutations or adaptations would have happened to live on Remus.
Right.
It's like, well, how did that doesn't make any sense. You're the same species.
Well,
you're the same.
The Romulans themselves, to again dip a little bit deeper into the canon, the Romulans left, their violent offshoot left Vulcan like 2,000 years prior to the Star Trek timeline. And then so the Romulans landed on their planet, they started their empire, and their mutations are very slight. They had no mutations in the original series, but they mutated slightly when it came to TNG. But then, yeah, like you said, the Remans, we just threw them in there, and they're totally different looking, and they had their powers were more pronounced. Why? But again, you're right. There's absolutely no.
It's like, I like the idea of being like some sort of class struggle, but it felt like it needed to be more of to fit with the Romulans. You needed to have more of a clearly xenophobic motivation for it because of what we know about the Romulans. And instead it's like, oh, well, it's the Remans who live right next to their planet, which was just very weird.
Right. Well, and I got it as like they had initially set up these mines and then like people who had like broken the law, or like it was those mines were like
slavers, right?
Yeah, like it was something, if you did something wrong, you got sent to these mines, and then
it was originally like Australia back then.
Yeah, it like kind of created a caste system for those who were born in the mines and then lived there their entire lives. That's where they started developing these different traits. But also, again, it was one of those where it's like wasn't really explained, and I would have been much more interested in having Shinzon show up as a kind of anti-hero hero to help liberate the Remans and get all of that backstory and everything to show like you are not like who you are set out to be. You are not destined, because he was destined to be a villain. He was destined to destroy Earth. So he was just fulfilling everything that he had been kind of programmed to do, even though he was saying he was going against it. So kind of, again, was completely counteractive to the entire kind of theme of the movie, which was you can create your own destiny. Like he did exactly what he was going to do anyway.
Right.
Just, without realizing
he was a clone, and he was going to control the Federation, and then the government changed, and so they tossed him in the mines because he was undesirable, and yada yada yada, and built him into this bitter backstory. But yeah, there was just, if I was to pick a low, or even to pick as we move in kind of the final portion of this, kind of what its legacy to the franchise is, that this was, when you hand the reins off to someone who doesn't really understand, I won't say Star Trek in general, though there is that aspect of it, but doesn't understand the characters, in particular characters that we've loved and revered and were so much more developed in the 15-year period of 7 seasons of TNG and then 3 films that preceded this one. It was all continuous. Now, it wasn't like TOS where there were 3 seasons, a 10-year gap, and then films that spanned over 12 years. So, and with middling character development within the series, and then middling character development, certainly for the ancillary characters that happened within the films and the series, where everybody of the 7 in the TNG cast, and even some characters like Dr. Pulaski and Tasha Yar and Wesley that were in and out, were really, really well developed. We really knew these characters. We knew what they were like. And then just, you're right, to have this film where you can tell that, they're like, hey, guy who's used to writing Fast and Furious movies, give us a Star Trek script. Which is ironic, because the guy who directed one of the Fast and Furious films directed the last JJ movie, which was actually the only one that quasi-watchable. But we'll be talking about that further on down the road. But yeah, my low to this was, I don't know what they were smoking at Paramount to just hand over not only a film in general of what's a very well loved segment of this franchise, the only other segment of the franchise of the spinoffs that made it to film because it was so popular, and just give it to somebody who just doesn't understand what the hell they're doing. That's why, because again, my question to you guys would be, why do you think this film bombed as badly as it did? To me, that's
didn't know the characters. Because he didn't know the characters, and I think that Paramount just thought it was an easy cash grab. I mean, kind of like what Disney did with Star Wars, with the last 2 Star Wars movies.
Right.
Where it was, we don't need to worry about it. We just need to put out a Star Wars film. So something Star Wars, just like they did with the Book of Boba Fett. It's going to make money. It's going to do great because it's Boba Fett, and everybody loves Boba Fett. Right. We could shit out, we could put a pile of shit in the front of the camera and put a helmet on it, and people would watch it because it's Boba Fett.
Boba shit.
Yes.
Oh my God. That is the best analogy. Katie, thank you. That's the best analogy of this film I've heard. People thought, we'll take a dump and put a helmet. We'll put a dump and put a Starfleet comm badge on it and stick a phaser in it. And we have we have some people
they were
go
coming off the high of, TNG, DS9, and Voyager, like that whole run of just like really, really well done Star Trek, and Star Trek couldn't lose. And, the previous films had been good,
right?
And then they're just like, we can do whatever.
And then you found out
Hubris
that you
comes before the fall.
Yes. Oh my God. All right. So let's wrap it up. I feel like we've said almost everything. But what final thoughts do you have about the film, looking at not only the legacy of TNG films, Star Trek films in general, but really the entirety of all of Star Trek? What do you think this film means to all of that? Peter.
I
mean, I clicked my computer. I'm looking. I'll find it.
This film in the history of Star Trek left the franchise in a really dark place. Like Enterprise was just finding its feet, so Enterprise doesn't really have blame here in particular. But in the mainstream consciousness, Nemesis made Star Trek look like a joke.
Yeah.
And it really put it backwards by a good margin, which is why when like I was going through like middle school, high school, like people would make fun of you for being a Star Trek fan, because like the idea that Star Trek was only for people who like crap came back,
right?
In part because of this film.
Boba shit.
And it also, I think, Insurrection did a little bit of this, but this film for sure did it, where they started to let the actors have more input into the story, not the character beats for their character, which is a good idea, but have a guiding hand in the story. And then we see that come to fruition in Star Trek Picard, and that's why we have a lot of the issues that we have.
Right.
So I don't think that Nemesis did not set Star Trek up for success. It set some precedent for later bad decisions. And it also made us look. I think it also set us up for the issue of looking to the past primarily, because everyone looked at Nemesis and was like, well, if this is what Star Trek is going to be going forward, then we can't do this. And this is why we started to get reboots and prequels,
right,
and all that, which is, in my not so humble opinion, not a very good idea. Don't get me wrong. I would love to see a show set in the lost era of Star Trek between Undiscovered Country and TNG. I would love that tremendously.
Agreed.
Like what's going on. There's nothing, we don't know what happens there. But to set things back before the original series, or, you know, let's constantly bring back, if we're going to reference TNG, we have to constantly reference like season 3 and 4. We can't actually talk about the films because the films are bad because Nemesis.
Right.
So it really put a bad cap on the end of TNG, which had the most solid series finale of any of the shows.
Oh yeah, it was phenomenal.
All Good Things is the best finale,
right,
because it was a love letter to the show.
Right.
Nemesis failed because it didn't understand the show, it didn't understand the characters, and it didn't understand its raison d'etre. Like, it didn't know why it existed.
Right.
Yes.
And very philosophical.
So that's kind of my like final thoughts. I'm sure I'll have more if you like spark something, but like that's kind of my final thought.
That's Peter's Forrest Gump moment. That's all he's got to say about that. Did change the name of the episode to Boba Zap T. Zap T. Because that's perfect. Katie, what is the legacy of this film to the franchise?
I would say, if anything, you know, I think to Peter's point, they floundered for a bit because it took them a while to understand why Nemesis failed, because you had Enterprise come in and then you had all of these reboots come in, and none of which were a huge success. I mean, I did like the first Star Trek reboot in 2009, that movie. I thought that was kind of fun. I looked at it the same way that I looked at the, the first Star Wars movie that was released.
Force Awakens.
Yeah, Force Awakens.
Force Awakens, yeah, where it seemed like it was one of those of like linking the old with the new, because you had, okay, this is an alternate universe. Like, I'm like, okay, cool, we can see something.
The alternate universe idea was fine.
Right, that was good. And I was like, okay, let's see where they go from there. And then it just ended up being all of these really weird, milked down reboots, because again, I don't think they understood why their movies weren't working. But then you had them coming in with things like Discovery and Strange New Worlds, which was going back to what original Star Trek people love, which is the characters. Right. It's the antics that the characters get into. It's not so much about what they are doing as to why they are doing it and what their drives are. So again, even though the first season of Discovery is trash, watching the character development and the way that Michael is definitely not the same person that she was in season 1 versus season 4. And the same thing with Strange New Worlds. You could never see an episode like we saw, or a movie based on Strange New Worlds that was written that way, where we never saw Chapel.
Right.
Or, she had 2 lines in an entire movie, because it is about the cast and how they build themselves together versus what's going on and how they weather that together. Right. So I think that if anything, the legacy was we did get a course correction of being like, no, we have to have people who understand what makes Star Trek great to write great Star Trek. At least that's what I hope. I hope that's the reason that we're getting this amazing stuff. Regardless, I won't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Right.
Because I'm very excited about them taking this turn.
Right. And your horse analogy is better than mine about the horse out the gate and then breaking all its legs. But yes, that is, you guys nailed it on the head. There's not a ton more that I can say, but it's a lesson that Hollywood, or the entertainment industry in general, just seems to fail to embrace when it comes to franchises, is that you can milk it along for so long, but it's certainly diminishing returns. I mean, if you look at, I bring up the Fast and Furious again, and Justin Lin, who actually brings Star Trek Beyond. Those movies started out with a certain audience. It grew. People enjoyed it, and it was dumb fun, as my partner Todd Oxford loves to say. But it's diminishing returns when you do it, no matter how you do it. So sequels will always continue to, it'll peak and crest, go back down again. The obvious exception is something like this, where you crank out something that is so blindly disloyal to everything that people enjoy is about Star Trek, and Star Trek is all about characters, where Star Wars is more so about action than it is about a lot else, because it's the wars versus the Trek, and the Trek, as even Gene Roddenberry has said, is the exploration of humanity through a lens of science fiction, and that's not at all what this film had to offer. This was a bunch of, let's see if that thing looks good if we do this thing or that or other, and this is cool. And there was even lens flare when the Enterprise jumped to warp, a precursor to JJ's to come.
Much slow motion. So much slow motion.
There were some aesthetic choices in this film that were very...
Yes. Right. This movie was 2 hours long just because there was a half an hour of slow motion.
And not only bad because that's corny, but even more to people like us who really get Star Trek, it's bad because we hate to see it, because it's a portrayal of what we actually enjoy, which is the exclamation of the human condition in a Shakespearean kind of fashion through Star Trek, which this was the exact opposite of. So, okay, wrapping it up, and this is only almost an exercise in futility. 1 to 10 piles of Boba shit. What do you give it? ... Peter, go ahead.
Compared to everything else that I've seen, because if I have to put on a scale, it has to compare to everything else. So we're throwing even like Final Frontier and things in there.
Yeah, 1 to 13. 13 films. Where do you... Maybe that's a better ranking of the 13 films.
So this one would probably be... like my second or third worst Star Trek film. My first one is still Into Dumbness.
For the first worst.
That is my pick for the worst Star Trek, in quotes, film ever made.
Right, exactly. Agreed.
And Final Frontier is... Those Nemesis and Final Frontier switch places depending on my opinion that day.
Right.
Because they have different issues. Final Frontier, though, got its characters better, so I think Nemesis might actually be worse than Final Frontier for that reason alone.
I would have to agree entirely. I think that nails it. Yeah, where Final Frontier is not a great film, it's a much better character study, even though they throw in weird shit like, now Spock has a half-brother, and we've never mentioned it before, but okay. They still found a way in some context to make that work, where the only thing that the three of us can agree on that worked in this film is that the CGI at the beginning was cool, and then it was...
The cold open was cool. The rest of it...
Then you 100% jumped into a flaming dumpster of Boba shit. There you go. So, yes. Katie, anything to add to that thought process as far as where you would rank it of 13?
I am of, lesser rank in the Star Trek fandom, where I have not seen all of the movies or remember seeing all of the movies.
And again, I don't know, quick sidebar, I don't know if I told you guys this, but when I got the 6 original films in 4K, which we did just recently. I said, April, let's watch one of these and see what it looks like. And I said, which one do you want to do? She's looking over, says, I don't know that I've ever watched Star Trek V. And so we sat and watched Star Trek V, because I was shocked, because April and I, in the 9 years we've been together, have watched every episode of Star Trek, but still had missed a film. So anyway, that was my quick cipher. Sorry.
Yes. But I would say out of the ones that I have seen, this is definitely ranking the lowest, just because of, it doesn't really have, or the kind of quote unquote redeeming factors that it has as far as the bones of the idea of the story that I could maybe find interesting, just were so poorly executed, and its treatment of its characters were so poorly done. And if there's one thing that I am a stickler for, and if you've ever heard me critique any of the Marvel stuff on SFU, I don't care how you change the character's story, as long as you don't change the character's heart.
Right.
And that is what they were doing, is they were just deeply changing the core of these characters to shoehorn them into a narrative that did not work for them.
Right. To no avail. Yes. I mean, they ultimately, and again, it happens infrequently in the entertainment industry, is that you really did see audience step up and speak with their wallet and say, this thing is a turd, and we're not gonna, the first wave of people like Peter and myself were like, new Star Trek film, woo, walked out of it. Fuck, I'm not going to watch this again unless I have to. Even though I still, I'm such a diehard that I still did, but I knew that it was bad as I was watching it. So they got my money when I bought the DVD, and then I bought the Blu-ray, and then I probably bought the Blu-ray again, and then I bought it on digital. And so, okay, fine. I know I have a problem.
Okay, in all fairness, you made it so that I didn't have to buy it on digital, because I just watched your digital copy.
Oh, there you go.
Well,
there you go. So we did. We stuck it to the man. All right. Well, that is the end of movie commentary for us. We do have a couple of weeks coming up where we may not, early in the year, where we may not have episodes to talk about. So we're going to, I know on the schedule we have moving on to talk about the JJ films, and we're going to kind of roll them into one big segment, super episode as it were. But also there's the possibility of talking about Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the Director's Cut 4K, which is in a lot of ways a different film than was discussed in the prehistory of this podcast. And the same thing with Star Trek 2. So we may do that. It's open to discussion. But starting next episode, Katie and I will embark on talking about season 2 of Star Trek Voyager. So we'll get back. So Peter will join us, obviously, to continue to talk about Lower Decks, and then we do have Prodigy that's going to come on later this month, so we'll have that to talk about too. But with that, Peter, please take us away.
All right. For more information about Starfleet International, please visit Grant Petoskey on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Excellent. And Peter, where do people find you out there on the medias of social?
So you can find me around at Petrus Aquinas. Again, I don't really post or say much, but you can find me.
But when he does, it's really good. I'm so sure. Katie, how about you?
You can find me on Twitter at QTGeek. That is Q_T Geek. And that's where you can find all of my angry rants about, comic stuff.
Stuff that is comic. I'm, of course, on Twitter at the C3. Go ahead and spell it out. You can also find me on most socials at that. April and I run the USS Grant Petoskey, which again is the preeminent Michigan chapter of the International Star Trek Fan Club. You can find us at a website of the same name and at socials of that stripe. I also try to fill up the Secret Friends Unite Facebook community with content, so please come find us there. So, friends, as always, thank you for joining us. I'm going to tell you that sharing is caring, and to keep on trekking.
And wherever you go boldly.
Peace and long life.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network. Visit secretfriendsunite.com for more great shows, articles, news, reviews, and more. Secret Friends Unite podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and other podcast services around the world. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, you can join us on Facebook or our new Discord server, or follow at Secret Friends U on Twitter. Please subscribe to Secret Friends Unite on YouTube and visit our merch store at tpublic.com. Just search Secret Friends Unite. Thanks for listening.